All right, good afternoon. This is Tommy Valentine with Historic Athens. We want to thank you for tuning in to today's episode of This Moment in History, COVID-19 in Athens, Georgia. Today is episode 39 of a planned 55 episodes that we're doing here to help examine and document this unique time in Athens, Georgia history. We've been speaking to a cross-section of community leaders, activists, elected officials, restaurant owners, entrepreneurs. Today's no different. Chris Herron today, who is with us from Creature Comforts, is a very busy person who many of you have had the chance to meet or see in action over the last several years as Creature Comforts has really established itself as a force to be reckoned with here in Athens, Georgia. We want to thank you for tuning in. If this is your first episode, we want you to know that this 55 episode series that will become a digital archive for local libraries is a historic record. And if you want to be a part of that record, the easiest way to do that today is not just to sit back and watch this episode, but to participate. If you have questions, comments, words of encouragement, just drop them as a comment below this live video and we'll go ahead and bring it on screen during our discussion with Chris. One last note before we bring our guest on is we want to thank this week's this week's sponsor. Each week of this 11-week series is brought to you by a different weekly sponsor, sponsoring 5 episodes each weekday at 1 o'clock. This week, Karen and Norman Baldwin sponsored our episodes, and we want to thank the Baldwins so much for their support in the work that we're doing here. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and bring on Chris. So I'm going to go ahead and switch out this virtual Chris over here for the real thing. So bear with us. All right, Chris, hello. How are you?
Hey, Tom. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you so much for making some time to be with us today. We know you're very busy and we appreciate it.
Well, not a problem at all.
Okay.
Glad to do it.
Good. So, Chris, I imagine that for many, many people in Athens, Georgia, and honestly, a much larger area than that every day, are familiar with Creature Comforts. Anyone who's visited Creature Comforts has probably seen you in action. But people may not know you directly, or there may somehow be 1 or 2 people left in the Athens, Georgia area that doesn't know Creature Comforts. Could you take a moment just to kind of introduce yourself and Creature Comforts to our audience?
Yeah, definitely. So, as you've nicely said, I'm Chris Herron. I'm the CEO and one of the founding members of the team here at Creature Comforts. We are a craft brewery that is located in downtown Athens, right at the corner of Hancock and Pulaski Street. At least our original brewery is. We also have a second location in Athens, not far away off of Oneida Street by Chase Street warehouses. And we opened in 2014. Since then, we are still at this point in time only distributed in Georgia. So we've stayed kind of close to home, but we've also been able to still within that find a lot of really strong success. So we're really one of the top craft breweries in the state and the region. And we have, really built our company around the purpose of trying to foster human connection. And we would definitely, say that we believe we're a purpose-driven organization, a purpose-driven business. We desire to use our business as a source for good in the world and certainly in our community. And that has been kind of a foundational part of why we exist. We make beer for a living. That's what we do. But it's not the why. And we're really honored to have been a part of this point in time in this piece of history in Athens. We're just in love with this city. We're grateful for the community here that has lifted us up and put us on their shoulders and carried us to cities far and wide. And we've gotten to do things, as a business that are beyond what we could have dreamed of when we opened our doors 6 years ago. So, yeah, we're a craft brewery located right here in the heart of Athens.
So Chris, can you tell us a little bit more about your background? How did you find yourself doing this work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got into craft beer. Well, I got into beer straight out of college. So I started my career with sort of the big breweries that are out there. I worked with Miller Brewing Company for about 3 years. And then I went to work for a company called Diageo, which is sort of another large multinational corporation with mainly focused on spirits brands. but they do have a beer component. They own Guinness, for example. And I worked on that side of it. I spent the first 6 years of my career between Miller and Diageo in sales, and then shifted and spent 6 years at Diageo on the finance side of the business. So kind of doing everything from pricing strategy work to sort of sales support and what we call commercial finance, and then finished up really moving into a more central finance role. Very focused, did some work with like investor relations reporting, budgeting, planning, just finished my career there as the finance director for their U.S. spirits and wine business, which was a $4 billion business. We were living in Connecticut for our second time. We didn't particularly love it either time. I'm a Georgia native from Stone Mountain, Georgia originally, and I was interested in starting a brewery on my own. I'd gotten into craft beer sort of through Guinness, probably around 2006. I started getting into it. I was a mediocre home brewer and knew that I loved craft beer. I just wasn't good at making it. So I set out to start a craft brewery in Atlanta, actually, and was looking for brewers. That's where I met my partners, Adam and David Stein and Adam Beecham, and they were starting a craft brewery here in Athens. They were starting Creature Comforts, and they were further along the path, and they happened to be looking for somebody to run the business. And so we did sort of a very quick speed dating round. We spent 2 hours on a phone. I flew down here about 2 weeks later, about 10 days later. We spent 2 days together, and then a week after that, we were business partners. And my wife was 7 months pregnant with our third child. We were living in Connecticut. We packed up our house. We moved in with my mom and dad, as all entrepreneurs do in their late 30s. And we cashed in our pension that Diageo had. And we kind of put all the chips in and said, let's chase a dream. And so very entrepreneurial, really spirit is what brought me to this company. And I've just, I say that I'm one of the founding members, but the real truth is that at this point in our history, we're founded by an enormous amount of employees who have dedicated the last 6 years to making Creature what it is. This is, it is far beyond what I could have dreamed or accomplished without all of them. So it's a big Creature family, we say now.
Every single word you just said was important, and yet there was part of my brain that shut down when I heard that you made this transition when you had a little one 10 months along the way.
7 months, yeah, 7 months pregnant with our third. Yeah, wow. I have a very loving wife, a great support system, and to move in with her in-laws, in Stone Mountain. So I was driving here, spending the day all day working and getting home late. Certainly in the early days, there was only 5 of us that were first getting it started. So there wasn't a whole lot of extra hands around. And her only real rule was that we had to be she didn't want to bring the baby home from the hospital to my parents' house. So we actually closed on our house here on a Friday and had the baby over the weekend. And me and my dad and father-in-law moved us into the house while my wife was recovering in the hospital for the 2 days. And that Tuesday was our first night ever in the house, and we had the baby. So our first night ever in our new home here in Athens, in this community, was with our new little boy Gavin.
Wow. A little later in the interview, Chris, anyone we talk to who's in a leadership role like you are, when we start talking about COVID, I'm going to ask you, how you've managed the stress and the responsibility and pressure of this moment as a leader. But clearly, you're no stranger to stress. If you can navigate that kind of situation.
We've done so my oldest at that time was 5, and this was the 5th home she had lived in.
Wow.
So we were moving from Georgia. We moved from South Carolina to Connecticut, back to Georgia, back to Connecticut, back here. We were moving at that point about every year, 12 months to 18 months.
Yeah.
So we kind of laughed that none of our children were born in the same state that they were conceived. It was we were always moving around that time, and my wife was working to get her nursing degree at that time, and had to go through 3 different schools to complete it. Which she's now a labor and delivery nurse here in Athens at Piedmont Regional, and so. Yeah, it's we've dealt with a lot of sort of that personal. I think that really helped us grow, quite honestly, as a couple early on.
I want to ask a question about your relationship with Athens, because I moved here when I was 5, when I was your oldest age, actually with my dad, who's an educator, my mom, who's a nurse. And we had kind of zigged around for a while, and then we landed here, and it was very clear, like, oh, this is where we're supposed to be. And I mean, we, for the most part, have been here since. Uh, you know, After all of that zigzagging, it's probably been really great for your kids to have the stability you've had just staying here.
Yeah.
How have you kind of settled into the Athens relation? What's your relationship to the Athens community itself?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, on one part, the relationship is very much real, a lot of my relationship with the Athens community is related to my role at Creature Comforts. I think certainly kids sports, are a piece of our life
Right.
that are very, very important. We do, when my wife and I go out for dinner dates, certainly it's, a lot of our favorite restaurants here in Athens. I took my oldest out not long ago for just a daddy-daughter date to Donna Chang's, and so we enjoy, I guess, a lot of the same benefits that others do, whether that's, going on hikes at the botanical gardens. I think there's a lot of great things for families here. Athens is this wonderful mix of both a great, a nice size that there's always kind of something to do. You don't have to do the same thing every time you go out.
Yeah.
When we were looking at Connecticut, it was very much like there really wasn't much to do. But you've got a bit more of that small town feel than what we had when we were in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
So you get sort of this wonderful connection of both a small town feel where, I was just telling people, it's like every time I go out, I see someone I know, but I also see people I don't know.
Right.
And I think that's kind of, just a great mix.
So I want to ask a little bit about Creature Comforts and their not only your ethic, and I know you've mentioned some of that idea, the idea of kind of sewing the community together. I know craving curiosity is a big part of what you do. But one question I want to ask about is ambition. I like a lot of people in Athens had the great fortune of being around right as you guys were getting launched, getting to try you at Classic City Brew Fest, getting to tour the brewery really early. And I remember probably the first tour I took of the brewery, you guys already had casks out. Like you were already talking about, I think like when we walked through the back room, they were like, here's where we're going to be aging casks. And you very quickly, I mean, the word bombers was discussed within the first visit. And I think nowadays, as the craft brewery industry continues to explode, that may not be as uncommon as it once was, but y'all were the first local brewery I'd ever seen go that far that fast. Can you talk a little bit about that ambition and how that's in, Creature Comforts' DNA?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'll talk sort of a little bit about that specific piece, and then also just sort of, I think, the broader context of where our ambition sits today.
Sure.
When we opened our doors, a lot of what we focused on was, and something we latched onto, is the idea of being industry respected.
Okay.
We kind of felt real early on, if we focused all of our energy on being respected by those in our industry, then that would eventually roll over into consumers loving us. And if consumers would love us, then that would eventually flow over into commercial success. And we felt really strong that if you went the other way and you focused on commercial success, it doesn't end up with consumers loving you, and it certainly doesn't end up with your peers respecting you. And so we, from I think the very outset, weren't really focused on commercial success. We were focused on what are the best breweries literally in the world doing? What are the things that the breweries that we admire the most? What do they do, and how do we, how do we imitate? How do we learn that? And then of course the goal is to evolve it. But I think the first thing is to just say, what is the model that we're looking at? And I think because we didn't go with the mindset of we have to be commercially successful, we didn't end up launching with like 5 IPAs and, and the stuff that we knew would sell. We launched with a rye amber that's still in our portfolio, and a Pilsner, and a Berliner Weiss. And I don't know when they're watching this if those will even be styles people are talking about. But that was unique too. Nobody was canning a Berliner Weiss when we did that. Now every brewery seems like they have one. And so I think it was, and the barrel program was just a part of that. The fact that the historic stylings, the ways that beer was made in the past presented incredible opportunities to both play with flavor and to honor really brewing tradition, which was really important to Adam and Blake and David as we opened. Was one hand, we wanted to be innovative. On the other hand, we wanted to honor the history of brewing. And I think even in the design and the layout of our space, we really wanted it to be a community gathering spot, because when you really go back historically, there was a lot, that's what a lot of breweries played a role as. You know, that part of their role was to be community hubs. And we're seeing that sort of happen now in America with the craft brewery movement, is that these craft breweries are being places that can bring people together. And so, you know, we aligned on that real early on. And then it's just, we also happen to find explosive growth. And so today our ambition looks like, really it's two things. We want to be, we say we want to be great and we want to be growing.
Yeah.
And the way we find that is, you know, being great is about putting our people first. It's about impacting communities, and it's about embracing sustainability. That's, you know, and we're pursuing a B Corp certification that hopefully we'll have this year, and recognizing that it's not enough to just be a growing company. You have to be a great company. The counterbalance of that is, we also believe like it is actually critical to grow. And the reason is because if you become a great company, but you don't grow, you don't influence others to be great companies. People won't look, they'll start to say, hey, this comes at the expense of that. You have to choose or the other. Whereas if we can be a company that grows in an explosive way and does great things, is considered a great company, then we influence other companies to say, maybe that's the key actually. Maybe being a great company is how you grow. And then we start to influence, and that's something that we take a lot of responsibility as a business, is how do we influence other companies, not just to change ourselves, but to change the other businesses to be more engaged with people and communities in their environment. And we're nowhere near where we need to be or where we're going to get to, but we've very clearly outlined that as sort of what our ambition looks like. And, you know, we hope that we will always provide a better product than the competition, and that we will steward the money that we receive better than our competition. And if we do those two things well, we hope that that's always going to make us feel good growing our business, stealing share from others, because every dollar that comes to our beer, we hope it's used better than if that dollar went somewhere else.
Oh, you know, on this topic, but just slightly in a slightly more nuanced direction. So you're right. You didn't start out with this portfolio of a lot of redundant beers. You had several different options. I mean, I think I told you this once, that that was around the time we realized, my wife, after several years of marriage, thinking she didn't like beer, we just realized she liked sour beer. And so it opened up this whole other world. You've stayed cutting edge since then. You know, I mean, I've had beer in your tap room that I can barely describe. I've had tiki influenced beer. I've had, I've been thinking about that one a lot lately. I see Travis Birch just dropped a comment in. Travis Birch from Heirloom said Reclaimed Rye is still my favorite. Hi, Travis. Thank you. Chris, the last beer I had in public before the world shut down was at World Famous. And, they are the one who introduced me to adding cold brew to Reclaimed Rye. Or I think about in your tap room, how many times that tap room has completely changed how it operates, how things are served, what's served, what pour-in options there are. And it's clear that you guys are not comfortable resting on your laurels. You have people that would catch a bullet for a 6-pack of Tropicalia, and yet you're not just hovering on that beer or making a million variants of it. You keep doing other stuff. So where does that urgency and kind of curiosity come from to just keep striving for new things?
Yeah, I mean, we actually define that as a value within our company, which is make it better. And whether it's community or beer, our job is to make it better, and that the best idea wins. And so we really are always trying. Like the day that we launched Tropicalia, the way that we've talked about that internally is, we believe that set the bar for IPAs in Georgia, in particular. And we said, so the bar is very visible now. Everybody is trying to get over that bar. If we are not trying to get over that bar, we're going to get left behind. And a company that I've talked about with our team before is somebody like Apple. who, they essentially put their own products out of business every 3 to 5 years with
Right.
something that's better. And we need to be that type of company. We actually talk a lot about, the tech space and that sort of mentality of pivot quick and fail fast and figure out how to maneuver more quickly than I think the beer industry has traditionally. And craft breweries in general have really sparked that. But we believe that to carry forward the history of beer is to carry forward a history of brewing innovation. Whether that is process innovation or whether it is flavor innovation, we feel that is a part of our responsibility as a brewery, is to be constantly pushing to figure out how to make it better, how to do it better, and how to leave a legacy, which is another value of ours.
Right.
That someday when someone watches this video, we hope that they don't just say, yeah, that was a brewery that existed. We hope to still be around, but we also hope to have done things that move the needle in some way for our industry, for our community, for beer. And so I think it is a part of the culture. One of our other values is crave curiosity. So you touched on that at the beginning. This idea of curiosity was really at the heart of who we are. When we started, we really landed on that as our tagline. And the reason for that was that we believed that if people were curious, that they would uncover things that they're passionate about, and that when you do that, you should work those passions in your life. And once you do that, you're happier. And when you're happy, that's when you can enjoy the creature comforts of life. And that was where, for us, this brewery became that, right? It became the end of a journey, of a curious journey we've been on, to land at some place that the brewery in and of itself was our creature comfort. It was our warm blanket. It was our hot cup of coffee in the morning. It was the thing that made us feel good. And I think and hope that for the people that work here, this is that kind of thing for them as well, that, we all have to find work. And I hope that for the employees and the staff that we have, Creature doesn't feel like just work. It feels like a safe, happy place to come.
Yeah.
And so we live that out, and really have set up guardrails as a company through our values to ensure that legacy carries forward of innovation and creativity.
Chris, I have two last questions before we transition over into our COVID discussion. One is, I know you mentioned Apple, so I'd like to ask something about the team family-based approach that you're taking with your personnel and with the team. I remember reading Walter Jacobson's book on Steve Jobs and how he ran Apple. And, he was so hyper focused on, having the A players. You got to have the A players. And if they stop being A players, you get them out the door and you bring in new A players, and what's interesting is I've known a handful of the people that work at Creature over the years. It does seem like people stay there much longer than the average job tenure here in Athens, Georgia. And it does seem like there's a lot of mutual loyalty and really kind of a familial relationship. But clearly also you're an organization that's constantly striving and pushing forward. So how do you balance the need for, to be better constantly, with also kind of cultivating that family relationship with your team?
Yeah, well, I like to think that we're filled with nothing but A players. But there's two ways to get that, right? You pick them, and when they're not, you cut them, and then you pick new ones,
right,
or you develop them. And what we've always looked at, another one of our values, is people over products. And so for us, this idea of people over products is that, products are expendable and people are not. And so when we enter into that relationship with someone, right, so we have to do a lot of work on the front end to ensure it's the right person to come into what we do consider a family, that work is done. And then once they're here, it is our job to invest everything we can into somebody. I would say the only sort of two ways to really, almost the only way I tend to think of really not remaining a part of this is not caring. I can't always force that on somebody. If they kind of lose sense, or they don't feel the connection that they once did with Creature, then I understand, that it's time for them to move on. But if somebody cares, if they love this company, if their heart is in it, then I really just feel like an incredible sense of ownership and responsibility. to help them get to the next level. So we've created a culture for sure, I think, amongst our leadership that knows like this is not a firing culture. It is a development culture. It is a culture that we're going to ask a lot of people and that we're going to encourage them, but we're going to provide the resources and leadership and guidance necessary. And when somebody's not delivering the way that we might think that they should, that the first place we have to do is look at ourselves as leaders, not at them, and see what could we do differently. Why are they not being inspired as well as they could be? Why are they falling short on capabilities? And ensure that we are doing everything we can. If they care, I don't think there's a whole lot that you can't overcome. And I think that's an important lesson for businesses. I came out of a culture that wasn't that way.
Yeah.
I sat in. I got high enough up that I had to sit in the sort of horrible meetings that were related to restructures where cuts were being made without regard to who the human was, and without and then managers were being asked to go tell someone that they're friends with that they're no longer a part of the business without really being able to give them a reason.
Right.
And nobody knew whether these people loved the company or not, and that was something that that was a large reason why I left, and why I wanted to do my own thing was I didn't think that was the right way. And I'm sure we'll talk about, COVID in a minute, but that played a strong role in our response to COVID, in terms of how we dealt with our people during that time.
Great. I can't wait to hear that. So my last question before we tilt to COVID is, I think we'd be remiss to not talk about your side initiatives. You have Get Artistic, Get Comfortable. Not everyone that drinks your beer yet is familiar with those, although increasingly a lot of people are. Earlier in our conversation, you mentioned your desire to be connected to the community. That's something that we've seen. I think it was either the first or second year y'all were open. I think you were marching in the MLK Day parade. I mean, you guys have been out in the community since you opened. Can you talk about the community initiatives you have where you're kind of living that out?
Yeah, so we've got a couple. There's sort of three main lanes that we run, and you touched on. It's Get Comfortable, Get Artistic, and then there's sort of a newer one that's called Brew for One. Get Comfortable and Get Artistic in particular are really about us learning about how community impact works. So, what we knew was that we didn't know much. That was about it. And so both of those programs are run by advisory committees of experts in our community. We've always sort of said we don't know what the problems and issues are, and we certainly aren't going to be the ones to come up with the solutions. But we have a microphone, we have a stage, and we have a platform, and we should use it to talk about meaningful stuff. And so with Get Comfortable, from the very beginning, we really set out to create a program that was ideally for Athens. It wasn't for Creature, and it wasn't for a cause. We say it's not cause-based, it's community-based. And the idea is that we leverage the advice of advisors in this community who are living and breathing this work every day to tell us through data and needs assessment data what the greatest needs are in the Athens community. And then we do RFPs and nonprofits submit, and then we help try to uncover which are the ones doing the greatest and most pressing work against those needs at this time. And the beauty of Get Comfortable is it can always shift, right? It depends on the needs of the community. We're not saying it has to go towards A, B, or C. We're asking what are the greatest needs of our community at this time, and how do we help move the needle? And that program has been incredible, and it's now 40 plus businesses, that give into the Get Comfortable Fund, and it really has become an Athens initiative that yes, we sparked and that we help sort of run on a day-to-day, but it's far bigger than Creature. Get Comfortable is really about sort of what we would say is survival. And then the other thing that we think is really critical for a community to be successful isn't just that it survives, but that it thrives. And Get Artistic is sort of playing into that space. One of the signs of a thriving community is a great arts community. Athens already naturally has pieces of that puzzle put together. And we just said, hey, we want to play a role in that. We know that when people get involved with the arts, the numbers tell us that they get a higher place attachment. They feel more connected to their community. And when people get more connected to their community, then they get more involved. They give more to nonprofits. They volunteer their time and energy. And so it really is a beautiful cycle that if we can encourage the arts, we can get more people involved. And as we get more people involved and attached to Athens, they'll get more involved in the community and the survival work that needs to happen. And so we really run those two. Brew for One is sort of this third program, which is we want to do for one what we wish we could do for everyone. And so this started with a really unfortunate circumstance of losing an employee of ours, Bob Weckback, who was a cellarman back in, I guess this was 2017. And we brewed a beer in his honor and gave the money to their family to start a college fund for his son. And then it transitioned the next year into another employee who had a nephew who struggled with NF, and so we brewed the beer and gave the money to that. And then this year we brewed Ria Pale Ale, which is another one, and we're again trying to find, and we have found, we just haven't announced it yet, who the candidate is that's going to receive the money and the funds this year to support them. So that came out of a lot of people reaching out to us and saying, y'all are a great community business. Would you brew a beer for this person that I know? Or I had this thing, and they're tragic stories. It's somebody's son who was lost, but their favorite beer was Tropicalia. Right. And we just sort of said, we can't all do all those things, but we shouldn't do nothing. We should at least do one thing a year. And so those are the 3 impact programs, and I'm really proud. I mean, those programs, the work that Creature has done, that in totality, the impact of Creature's community work is, and I was looking at the number the other day, so I know it's $2,009,954.11 in 6 years, which is, and that's that's through the total impact of our program. So obviously, other businesses are giving into that as well. But without these programs, that money may not be here and that impact. So we're extremely proud of what we've done and accomplished with the community so far. But we also recognize there's a long way to go. We've got a lot of challenges here in Athens, and so we always want to be a part of the solution.
Yeah, and of course, all of this is on top of, as you said, trying to set a good example, reaching for B Corp, encouraging other businesses to do the same. All right, folks, we've arrived at the time to talk for COVID. We're going to very briefly flash on the screen our annual sponsors and say thanks, and then spend our time digging into this with Chris. So don't go anywhere just because you see the screen switch out. We're just going to say this quickly. Thanks again to Karen and Norman Baldwin for supporting us this week of this broadcast. The names and logos you see, these are the annual sponsors that help sustain our organization. We are, as I've mentioned, a 52-year-old nonprofit. And that's quite old, but I promise you the bills still arrive every month. And so we really appreciate the people here who help us keep our team employed and the lights on, especially at a time like this. We also have over 300 members locally. If you'd like to become a sponsor or member, it starts at as little as $5 a month. You can find out more at historicathens.com. And we'd really love to have you as a member. This is the schedule of our guests. You can see Chris's name on there, along with the many others we have. Tomorrow we have County Commissioner Jerry Neesmith, and we have state reps, business owners, David Bradley, the Chamber of Commerce, a whole bunch of additional folks coming up. So we definitely hope that you will come back and see that. After this at 2 o'clock, we hope that you'll head over to the Athens Welcome Center page. Athens Welcome Center is one of our 2 side initiatives, and their staff has been doing a great job of doing original historic live casts on different subjects. So we hope that you will check that out. And then one last thing I'll just point out, we partnered with Satisfactory Printing to start a line of limited edition historic t-shirts. You can see Boulevard, Rock Springs, and buildings of Athens. Actually, Chris, if only I could zoom in far enough, these are a designer chose all their favorite buildings of Athens, and Creature Comforts, the Snow Tire building, is actually one of those that's being celebrated there. But anyway, if you visit historicathens.com, folks, you guys can check that out. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that off screen. So okay, so Chris, welcome back. So thanks for giving us that opportunity there to say thanks to our folks. So diving into COVID-19. All right. So here's how I'd like to lead us in. My middle brother and his girlfriend relocated here during COVID, quarantined with my folks since March. And one of the ways that we passed the time is every Monday I would go over there. We called it Marvel Mondays, and he hadn't seen any of the movies, and we just gradually worked our way to Endgame. And so when we finally arrived at Endgame, of course, it was a big Creature Comforts event. I had to introduce him to the Hammer Time cocktail that kind of swept through here, the Negroni with Tropicalia on it. But, it's funny, things like that, movies or beer nights or things like that. I mean, your name is Creature Comforts, and we've definitely gone through a season where Creature Comforts, not just the proper name, but in general, has been really important. I know we're going to talk all about the changes for your operation and the logistics of it, but did COVID-19 make you reflect at all on, I mean, you do all these things in addition to what you do. You said we do that, we make beer, but that's not the why. But the beer comes comes in handy. I mean,
It allows us to achieve our why.
that's right. It allows you to choose why. So, I mean, at moments like this where folks are trapped indoors, where they're under a lot of stress, having something like your beer is probably an important outlet. Did this scenario make you reflect at all on the importance of what you're doing and brewing over there?
I mean, I think that I would just obviously this is there are far greater things and concerns going on with COVID and the world than beer. But we are, as a company, our purpose is right to try and foster human connection. And so why we love beer and why we're into beer is because of the ability that it has to bring people together. Most of us met or our best friends or maybe our significant others or our life partners over a beer somewhere, and even if you didn't have a beer, you said, let's have a beer.
Right.
And I think, that is just a very, it's the language of the world, the idea of getting together and having a beer. And so I do think that what we do for a living has an opportunity to feel good for people, and that these are the small comforts that are still left. We can still get
Right.
A 6-pack of Trop and feel a touch of normalcy in our life compared to where everything else that's going on. So much other stuff felt so changed, and we really saw that actually. I mean, we as a business in the off-premise, so in the grocery channel, have picked up almost 4 share points in the craft beer category.
Wow.
Which is an enormous amount during COVID. And I think what that has been a testament to is building a trusted brand. And in times like this, we all are kind of going back to our roots a little. We're like, what are the things that are like what you said, our creature comforts that give us this little bit of extra boost and make us feel a little bit better? And I think Creature has developed and created and made brands that over the years, as craft has grown and there's a million new entrants, and people continue to sort of go out and they search the set. They shop all the time for new things. During this time, a lot of people, I believe, have resorted back to the brands that they know and trust, and that bring them comfort. And it's been really, quite frankly, just humbling and promising to see that we've built that kind of brand, that we have the type of brands and the types of beers that bring people comfort, that during a time like this, people would lean into and not lean away from. So yeah, I mean, I think our beer can play a really critical role in this. I always like to say, anytime we're talking about this, that we believe that beer plays a great role in human connection until it doesn't. Moderation matters is one of our other values, and I do think that it is an incredibly difficult line that we have to walk to acknowledge where beer helps, but also be extremely open to the fact that for many communities it hurts. For many relationships, it hurts, and that when it's not drank in moderation,
Right.
All of the benefits of that connection fly out the window. And we never, that's not why we're in beer. It's why we don't sell super cheap beer. It's why, it's why our environments are designed the way that they are. Is we hope people experience beer in a responsible and moderate way. And during this time, I certainly hope that's been the case for people, and that it's been. Beer as a category has really always sort of been the alcohol beverage of, honestly, responsibility. It's lower ABV. Generally, it takes longer to drink than most of the other things.
Yeah.
And so for social settings, it can be a really, great tool compared to some others. So we hope that we're on the right side of what beer does in our community.
For sure. So, all right. So let's talk about how it affected logistics. So, can we start with the drive-through? Is that cutting ahead too far?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that was the beginning of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, when this hit, right? We got all of our leadership in a room on Friday the 13th, of March, like many other companies did, and said, what do we do? At that time, we didn't know that the tasting rooms would all close and the restaurants would all close. It wasn't quite that clear yet. All that guidance hadn't really come down the pipeline yet. And so we had started brainstorming, though, should that happen, what do we do? And, gratefully, we have a drive-through. We actually have an entrance on Washington Street that comes all the way through our parking lot and exits at the front onto Hancock. And ironically, when we redid our parking lot, so we used to just have an asphalt parking lot, and we redid it into what we think is a beautiful patio area.
Yeah.
Our plans actually had us tearing up that driveway and adding seating down it to make it sort of a walkway to bring a connection to Washington Street. And we just didn't really have the money, and we had to cut somewhere. So we were like, all right, we'll just do that in phase 2. At this point, I don't think phase 2 is ever coming. Wow. I think we're just going to keep the driveway.
Yeah.
But it's been an incredibly, it's one of those things where you just, again, this kind of goes to that people piece. When we had that meeting, the first thing we said is, okay, we have a value of people over products. Our first priority is, can we do this without laying anybody off and without anybody dealing with any financial burden as a result of this happening? So not only is it not to lay them off, we won't have the same number of hours in our tasting room. We won't have the same number of tips. And so what we went and did is we said, okay, we're going to look at what the average tips have been over the last 6 months for an employee by hour, across the company. And we just said, here's your base pay plus average tips. And then we looked at what an employee had worked for the last 6 months on average in terms of hours and said, we're going to just pay you that every week, regardless of whether you have to show up or not. We're going to make you whole. Now, as a result, will you help us figure out how to make this tasting room work? Will you help us come up with brainstorm ideas on how to make products work? Because we always say people over products, but without products, we won't have people. So there's a beautiful tension that exists. And the tasting room staff just, they went to work and they quickly figured out a way to do it and make it touchless, which was a word that didn't, I feel like, even exist in the past, or contactless drive-throughs. And they created a drive-through that, although it's a long way from what our business was doing before, it's extremely helpful. And they also, helped come up with ideas on hand sanitizer and how we could produce that. And just, to watch that sort of reaction from everybody. But I think it was really powerful to early on be able to tell everybody, we're going to keep you employed. And then what we did is we took all the tips that did come through the drive-through and we donated those to Get Comfortable, because this was also our season of Get Comfortable, season of emphasis for that. And that program got, essentially decimated. All of the beer that we produce for that it drives a lot of the money that we bring in through sales of that beer that we donate to the Get Comfortable Fund. It all got stuck sitting at our wholesaler because all the bars and restaurants shut down. And so that sort of fund was getting decimated. And so this was just a great way for us to be able to pivot and say, look, the employees are our responsibility, and ask the community to help with Get Comfortable. And they did. They showed up in an extremely large way. And just in April, we were able to cut checks of $135,000 to nonprofit partners here in Athens, when normally those checks are cut in December. So, we were able to just really move things forward. And that was, again, not all Creatures money. That's other businesses that were able to respond as well. I've lost your volume, Tommy.
Sorry about that. So we, one of the innovations you had, in addition to the drive-through, and I was tempted just now to run over because they're on my kitchen counter, but I'll just let the audience imagine, it wasn't just the drive-through. You also did something else that was a little unique. You bottled your own hand sanitizer. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we that first came out of again, that original meeting. The idea was, hey, what if we can't buy enough hand sanitizer for our tasting room for our guests to feel safe? And then we said, what would we do? And so we kind of we scenario played all these situations. And then we said, well, we have all these chemicals naturally within our brewery, and we run a sanitary operation. That's part of what being a brewery is about. Can we make it? And so we have isopropyl. And so the World Health Organization had put out a recipe, including it. There are a couple ingredients we had to buy. And then all of a sudden there was this enormous shortage for hand sanitizer across the entire country. And we said, well, goodness gracious, we can buy this at industrial sizes from our suppliers, and we could mix this in a 2.5 barrel tank that we used to use for beer, and we could bottle this into beer bottles that from a machine that is supposed to use beer, and we can cap it, and we can, we can do something. And so in typical sort of what I think is Creature way, we always say we want to make it better. We didn't just try to, package something. We tried to, one, repurpose resources we had, but also come up with a fun brand. So we came up with Clean Creature, which was, and at that time, it was really unifying, I think, for a lot of the company. Sales were plummeting. Their bars and restaurants were closing. Our tap room revenue was all gone. I mean, we lost 50% of our revenue overnight. And no one was kind of like, what are we doing? And so having a project to focus everybody on was really, really impactful. So our design and brand teams went to work on creating that and creating labels and working with suppliers to get the labels, and production and our lab went to creating the formulas, and our tasting went to figuring out drive-through and how to sell it. And what was crazy, Tommy, is when we would have hand sanitizer, our beer sales through the drive-through were up 88%. So it would bring, the first day we released it, we had a line around like 3 blocks.
Yes, I was in that line. That's right.
And we were like, holy moly, we have got a thing going on here. We've got to get to work. And so, and then, we also were able to donate over 1,000 bottles. So every nonprofit that reached out during this time, we've been able to donate. And so we had sort of priced it at this $8.49 a bottle, which I learned later is probably like half what our peers were charging. But the math we did was basically, hey, if we could, sell 2 bottles, it would allow us to give away 1 bottle. And that was kind of the model that we sort of leaned into was, hey, look, that way we're not losing money. We're not necessarily making money on it, but we're not losing it, and we'll feel good that we can just give away whenever people in need ask. And that's been awesome. That's been a great part of, I think, leaning into your purpose. I said a lot of times in this, it's real easy to lean into your purpose and values when things are going well. The real challenge for businesses and leaders and companies is to lean into those purposes and values when things are going difficult. That's when you find out if they're really true guardrails, if they're real things within your company culture, or if they're words on a page. Mm-hmm. And so I think I'm really proud of the whole team here for leaning into it all.
I know we don't have too much time with you left, but in the time we do have, I know there's 3 questions that I'll ask as we kind of head out. But earlier you alluded to something I wanted to get back to, which is you talked about how the familial team-based relationship you have led you to make certain types of decisions once you realized COVID was here. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing was, again, was leaning into that piece of we're not going to let anybody go.
Right.
And we haven't. And not only were we not going to let them go, we were going to ensure that they didn't deal with a financial burden. And so up to this point, we've still continued to pay what they would have earned plus tips, all of our hourly employees. We just continued to say, and we guaranteed whatever hours they had been averaging over the last 6 months. So if somebody had been averaging 20 hours a week and making X as a base and Y as tips, we just said, regardless of whether we even give you a shift or not, we're going to pay you that amount of money.
Wow.
Because that just felt like for us the right thing to do. And so whether that was production hourly employees or our tasting room, we took on that burden of ensuring that there wasn't financial, pain. And look, there were government programs like the PPP that were designed to help businesses like us do that. And if we're going to take that money, we're supposed to use it to help our employees, and so I think, for us, that made sense. That was sort of, okay, that's how we do it. And it's been a financially difficult time for Creature, just like any business, I guess, during this time. I'm sure there's some businesses that have done better. But as I mentioned earlier, we lost 50% of our revenue. Our tasting room has been, sort of bleeding money for 2.5 months, which used to be our most profitable piece of our business. all of the bars and restaurants that we used to sell beer to, which was 35% of our business, went away.
Wow.
And, of course, for them, 100% of their business went away. So, we're fortunate that we had grocery and liquor stores and package stores. That was always about 50% of our business, and it's done well. That channel has actually seen an increase, and we've grown share. It hasn't offset the losses from the other side, but it's allowed us through that and the PPP loans to be able to keep everybody employed. And we see, we're seeing signs of the on-premise returning. We're hopeful about getting our tasting room back open sooner rather than later, and being able to see a sense of normalcy back to how we operate.
Okay. Chris, I guess one last question, general question, which is, every person I've spoken to in any position like yours, any leadership position, we keep hearing again and again, organizations talk about the way their organization will be different coming out of this. The innovations they learned, the situations they survived, that they're likely to be different organizations on the other end. Do you feel that's true for Creature Comforts?
It's definitely true. One of the way I would help describe this internally to some is we've paid an enormous cost for COVID-19, as many businesses have. If we don't come out of this better than we went into it, then that cost is even higher, right? If we can come out of this significantly better, having taken this time to challenge ourselves on how we operate. I mean, when we reopen our tasting room, I don't only think it'll be COVID friendly, it will be better than the way it was before. And as we've explored how we can work internally and we've taken this time to strategize about our future, I believe that what we've tried to do is take the losses that the business incurred and turn them into investments, and said, look, if not for COVID, we wouldn't have had the time to think about this, the time to redo our tasting room, so we need to take this and we need to spin it so that it's an investment that we can look at and say, we got so much out of those lost sales, because it did create some space and some time for some employees in particular to be able to stop, think, and add value and lend a voice to how we move forward. So, yeah, I mean, I think any business that's kind of coming out of this looking like the same as they went into it, that they quite honestly, they squandered an opportunity and they've accentuated the loss on their books beyond just that. This was an opportunity and continues to be for us to really challenge the way that we did things in the past and move forward as a better organization, more prepared for the future. So I think Creature's done an incredible job of that, and time will tell. Time will be the judge of whether we use this time wisely or not.
Okay. Chris, we're going to try to get you out of here on time, so I'm going to try to run through these last 3 questions we've had. We've really appreciated having you here. I see Andrew Ratcliffe, one of our other favorites, Andrew with Tweed. We appreciate Tweed's sponsorship at Porch Fest last year. Well said, Chris. Alex Sams did jump in to say, thank you for operating out of 2 historic buildings in Athens. My dad took me to Snow Tire when I bought my first set of tires in the 80s and asked Mr. Kelly, the manager, to set me up with a set of retreads. That building was the last of the downtown automotive companies. And so I wanted to make sure I shared those things with Chris. But Chris, I know we're going to have a question about historic things in 1 second. So the first question, Chris, is this, as we head out. If tomorrow you woke up, somehow this was all over, maybe some Groundhog Day situation, it's all over, you have the day off, every business in Athens is open again, where would you go? How would you spend your day?
Well, I would my favorite place is actually where I work. So I would selfishly bring the family down and have the kids run around and play in the outside space. But, I would make my way by World Famous, probably get some food from there. It's one of my favorite dining places for a quick bite, and probably a cocktail. And, I don't know, over to the theater or 40 Watt to try to catch a show or some smaller bar, and then maybe the National for dinner. It's one of my favorite spots. So that's kind of our sort of typical my typical kind of run if I'm out, but I don't get out very much. So I'd probably just end up taking my kids to soccer practice or something.
That would be good too. As Alex alluded to, you're a business that's invested in historic places a lot. Both your original location, the additional section that you guys have opened up out in Southern Mills are in historic places. You're no stranger to historic places. So we've been asking each of our guests to name some of their historic places. We imagine coming out of this, there'll be a lot of building. We want to keep our preserved places, and we want somebody who's watching this interview 50 years from now to be able to go out and explore the same historic places that we can explore now. Chris, what are some of your favorite historic places or areas in Athens that you hope future generations get to enjoy?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll say that in terms of future, because it's not there yet, and I don't know where it's going to go. But what we're doing down at Southern Mill, I think it was wonderful to get to renovate a historic building in downtown Athens that was sort of amongst an area that was already populated. To get to go be sort of the cornerstone piece and the first piece of a puzzle down at Southern Mill, a building from 1890, and the history of manufacturing that was there, and to be bringing life back into that. And with what I understand to be some of the plans for that area, I'm really excited for where that goes. It's a large scale development of a historic building in Athens. And so certainly we're really proud of the work that we've been able to do with the one piece of the building. We have other pieces of that we're hopeful to be a part of as well. So I think that's super exciting. And then, I guess, many things become historic with time. I'm sure there are some places that aren't truly on the historic list, but I think the classic music venues of Athens, I hope are here for a very long time. Being able to walk in somewhere and see the names on the wall or the pictures, and to know that you're standing in a place or watching a band on a stage that some band who was tiny and is now huge once stood on and played on, and that who you're watching could be that someday. I think is just I think that's the idea of the music of Athens and the history of that, I think lends itself to just being something that I hope is still around for years and years to come.
Yes, for sure. An Athens, Georgia without the 40 watt, for example, is hard to imagine. It's on the Athena can.
You put it on a can, so
That's right. So our last question, Chris, is this: if somebody is watching this 100 years from now, what would you want them to know about Athens at this time?
I'd want them to know that there's been progress made, but it's a complicated city still, and that quite frankly, we have a lot of work to do. And I hope if someone's watching this in 100 years, that they're watching it amongst mixed company, that they're watching this with people that don't look like them, and that the idea of equality is real, and that we're in a better place than we are today.
Well said, Chris. Thank you so much for making time to talk to us today. We really appreciate it. As a parting thing, I do want to say this, or where are we at? I'm gonna just quickly share this with our audience. Hold on one second. So this is, if I'm correct, Chris, I think it's still current, right? You guys are updating the to-go beer menu on your website each day. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, I'm going to switch this to solo, but yeah, definitely head over to the Creature Comforts website. Chris, it's available 2 to 8. Is that right?
That's correct. The drive-thru is open from 2 to 8, and I encourage everyone also, if you follow us on social media, because as we begin to try to find ways to bring some of our other environments back to life, that'll be the best place to kind of catch those updates, and we would love as we try to figure that out to see people. I miss seeing people have a beer at the brewery.
Yeah. I can promise you, people miss having a beer at the brewery. So, Chris, thank you so much for everything Creature Comforts is doing. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us today. To the audience, we'll be back tomorrow at 1 o'clock. We hope you'll tune in. everyone out there, be safe and healthy, and go support Creature. So thanks a lot, Chris. Take care. Okay. Thanks a lot. Bye.